You're listening to Advancing Our Church. Welcome to Advancing Our Church, a Changing Our World podcast about Catholic stewardship, leadership, and advancement. And I'm your host, Jim Friend. Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you're having a terrific week. We are trucking along through the fall season here. The leaves are falling, and the cold air is just starting to creep in here in beautiful Pennsylvania. And my wife, Kristen, has been super busy this fall. You know, many of you know that Kristen has a website. It's at kristenscrosses.com. Over the last year, she's been producing these prayer videos on YouTube. And it was something that she started and that she learned at the start of the pandemic. Her mission was just to put together 4 videos, one for each of the 4 decades of the Rosary. And we sat down one afternoon as a family, and we all 5 of us prayed the 4 decades of the Rosary. And she created these slides so that you could watch the video, you could pray with our family and read the words along with the prayers. Well, to all of our surprise, a little over a year later and almost 3 million views of just those 4 videos, she's just continued to build out that site. There's over 50 prayer videos now, and you can find prayers like the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, a novena to Mary, Undoer of Knots, prayers to Saint Joseph, and so much more. So I'm just a proud husband bragging about her because this ministry has literally touched people all over the world, and it's just incredible. She just now started to publish a daily prayer video also. So I wanted to let you know that there are daily prayers that include the gospel, a reflection, the daily rosary, and a lot more. So if you have a long commute, or if it's something you like to actively pray, or maybe even have it going on in the background in your office, I invite you to go to kristenscrosses.com, and you can also find a link to the show notes of this episode. I'm a proud husband. What can I do? I got to brag about my wife. She does amazing things and continues to support me and the kids in countless ways. So with all that said, let's get to work. This past week, I had the opportunity to speak with Father Jim McDermott. He's a Jesuit priest and a writer for America Magazine. Father Jim writes about pop culture and our faith. And so, obviously, I'm a fan of both, and I was interested in learning more about Father Jim. This was a great conversation because Father Jim shares his experience as a writer for pop culture, but also about his experience of writing an op-ed this year about his life as a gay priest and the support that he received from his community after he wrote this article. I think you're really going to enjoy meeting Father Jim McDermott today. So without further ado, here's our conversation. Well, we're live on Facebook, and we're here with Father Jim McDermott. Father, thank you for joining us on Advancing Our Church. It's great to meet you today.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
I'm just going to offer a little background on Father Jim before we begin our conversation today. Father Jim is a member of the Jesuit community at Loyola Marymount University, a screenwriter and a regular writer on TV, movies, pop culture, and spirituality. He is the Los Angeles correspondent for the Jesuits America Media. Originally from the Chicago area, Father Jim studied literature at Marquette and Harvard universities and entered the Jesuits in 1992. He then studied liturgy and Old Testament at the Weston School of Theology in Massachusetts, where he received his master's in divinity. He earned an MFA in screenwriting from UCLA and interned in the development department of the AMC network. He was ordained a priest in 2003. In his Jesuit formation years, he served as an English teacher, drama coach, and bus driver for the Jesuits' Red Cloud Indian School on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Father Jim has also spent a year working in and exploring Australia. While living in New York, he was an improv comic as well as a writer, and continues to write a weekly newsletter along with his tweets and blogs on pop culture and spirituality. And he occasionally writes about how television, believe it or not, can help your spiritual life. Welcome, Father Jim. So great to meet you today.
Thank you. Now, just one correction. Actually, in July, I moved to working full-time as an editor at America Magazine in New York. So I'm actually based in New York now as of
wonderful.
July. Yeah.
Oh, you're not that far from our home office. We're based in Manhattan as well. That's great.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. And as I understand it, the editor-in-chief just announced that he's going to be stepping down from America Magazine.
Yeah, actually, Matt Malone, who's been the editor for almost 10 years, he's going to do one more year or about 15 months, and then he'll be stepping down, I was an editor here in the early 2000s, and then I've just come back. The place is like night and day. It's tremendous what he's done in that 10 years, and the staff that he's hired. So it's sad. It's sad for me because I love him, but it's exciting too, because he's done just incredible work at putting this place to like the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, moving. What the article said is that he moved you guys into the digital age, which I'm a digital subscriber and appreciate getting it on my iPad every couple of weeks. And just it's a tremendous resource, and I'm sure very time-consuming ministry, but well worth it. It reaches all around the world.
Yeah, no, it's when I started in 2004, Tom Rees would talk about wanting to be where we are today, and it really took Tom and then Drew Christensen and then finally Matt. It really took Matt to be able to dream or figure out how to get us to that place. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Well, Father, you have such an incredible and interesting, diverse background. You don't see a lot of priests with backgrounds in screenwriting and media and all that, which obviously plays into the blog and the many things that you've done. Tell me, was your road to the priesthood, the road to your vocation, always clear to you, or what is your vocation story? Tell us a little bit about how you got where you are today.
Yeah, no, I mean, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and we'd go to church on Sunday or Saturday night, actually, and we'd go to CCD. I went to public school. I never thought about being a priest. I went to Marquette University as an undergrad. I really didn't do much in terms of Catholic stuff there, but I was an RA in a residence hall, and there was a Jesuit who lived in every dorm. And actually, so I did that for 2 years. And the first year I thought that was really strange. And I was like, oh my God, there's a priest in this building. I'm going to stay away, because I just didn't have any context for that. Yeah. But he was really helpful to me and to a lot of other people in terms of pastoral support. And sort of, for me, it was like advising me on how to help some students that were having issues. And so I got to meet him better. I got to know him better. I got to meet other Jesuits. And I was really intrigued by the relationships they seem to have with each other, the kind of camaraderie, their take on the church, which seemed really intelligent and also a bit irreverent, which is pretty much my own sort of, I don't know if I'm intelligent, but irreverent, right. For sure. Like, I get a little nervous around too much sort of traditional piety. It's just not the way I was raised. So they got me interested. And then I went to graduate school and I met more Jesuits. And through all of that, I decided to enter.
That's wonderful. At what point, I'm curious, were you a stand-up comic?
Well, not a stand-up. I wish someday. I hope I'm
someday you still have aspirations. Awesome.
For sure. I did improv when I was in New York before. And let me just be honest, like, by saying I did improv, what that really means is I took classes at UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade, and performed with my class group, but I was not terribly good at it. My life is more funny in spite of myself than because I choose because I make the right funny choices. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm in doing some research on you. You touch a lot of different kinds of pop culture. I was watching a panel you were on called Jedi and Jesuits Explore the Deep Side of a Galaxy Far Away. That was such a cool panel. What was some of your takeaways from that conversation? Because it's just the way they tried to tie our spirituality to the Force, and then just kind of the relationships and the stories. What were some of your thoughts on that conversation?
I mean, that was a conversation at Fordham University a couple of years ago as Rise of Skywalker was about to come out. It's funny. It was before the movie came out, and I think we were all hoping. For something different than we got.
Well, the movie, kind of.
I mean, what I love about the conversations around Star Wars is the way that themes of redemption and mercy are so central to that story, or the way that people end up kind of saving each other, that it's about community. It's not really like it's a community of heroes. It's not like some one person that, and there's a sense of sort of embracing the shadow side of ourselves and the consequences if we don't do that I think is really wise and interesting.
Yeah. Well, it was inspiring to me. I mean, those were the movies I grew up with, the original trilogy. And then, of course, just now experiencing the final trilogy was. And I share your opinion. I was a little disappointed with the final movie and the way they wrapped up these 9 movies. As a screenwriter, Tell me, as a screenwriter, how would you have tied it up? Yeah, you must have thought, geez, if I was writing this, I might have tweaked it this way or that way. What would you have done?
Wow, gosh, that's a good, in some ways, I think that Rian Johnson did such an amazing job with the eighth movie, with the one that came before that. I felt like he was sort of saying, really, the story ends here. And he ends it with kids looking far away, sort of like Luke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. At the end of the eighth movie, I thought, well, where are we going to go from here? Because I feel like they wrapped up a lot of loose ends. We got the end of Luke Skywalker. Like you said, there was the boy looking at the stars. I thought, I'm not sure there was a lot more to look forward to in the ninth movie, but then there was a ninth movie. So
yeah. I think I wish that Kylo had gotten more. I felt like all through the three, it's really more Rey's story than it is his. But
yes,
if you follow like who has the challenging arcs, they both do. And in some ways, his is much harder. He has so much to overcome that I was intrigued. I would have wished for more somehow about that. And also, like, I think Rey's story is great. It's just tying her back to the Skywalkers in the end felt like a bow you don't need. You don't need that to be tied up like that. Let her go forward, be the next thing rather than more of the last. Yeah.
It was interesting. Kylo Ren's arc was interesting to me because I had a hard time seeing how he was turned to the dark side, because it seemed as though he had relatively supportive parents who maybe got divorced. It looked like they separated at some point along the journey, and maybe that's how this dark influence, but he had Luke and he had Leia. It seemed like his father loved him and fought for him until the very end. His arc of turning evil, I think, was the hard part for me to really get behind, but then turning back to good at the end, that made sense to be who he truly was and who he was truly raised to be by his parents and his family.
I will say, I felt like one of the great choices of that movie is that they tied the death of Leia to his conversion, that he feels her die and it changes him. That to me that was horrifying and so sad that Carrie Fisher died before that movie could be made or just at all. She's just such an amazing woman.
Yeah.
And, to be able to to take that moment and make it something important in the story, I just thought it was very moving, very, very moving. Yeah.
It was. That's a great point. Yeah, she was funny. She was a very funny person, great performer. So, Father, switching gears here a little bit, back in January of this year, you wrote, I would call a very brave, a very forthright article on coming out as a gay priest, and you wrote a wonderful op-ed. You've been very open about your sexuality and how the Jesuit community accepted you and supported you through this whole process. What caused you? What was it? Was there something internally at this point in your life that caused you to write that article?
Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for saying that. It was. It's been I've been very grateful that I've been able to write about it, and that people's responses have been very kind. I think so. I'm 52, and I think I just, as I've gotten older, I have felt like, it's not like in writing that, it wasn't like I was recently revealing to myself or other people who knew me that I was gay, but it felt like, I just felt like I was getting to a moment in the church, that in my own life in the church, that I guess I was afraid that I was living in a bigger closet, that actually, having come out to friends or within the society, I thought I was out and honest and forthright, but then it felt like maybe I'm not. Maybe I've just found another way of being comfortable with keeping a secret. And I feel like the church, one of its big challenges, at least the hierarchy of the church, is this whole secretive nature of things, which I think we're currently trying to overcome and change, but I think we resist it as much as we sort of support it. So for me, coming out was in part anyway, it was about trying to find a way for myself to resist that impulse to secrecy and to say, like, I think that impulse is extremely dangerous and undermines credibility and ends up hurting people. And I don't want to be a part of that. So a lot of it was that, and wanting also, I don't know what this exactly looks like yet, I guess, but it seems I find it very hard that other queer Catholics, they just they face such abuse or misunderstanding by the church, by some figures within the church, which are not necessarily the hierarchy, but it certainly includes members of the hierarchy. They face that, and then queer priests in general, we don't have to deal with that ourselves. So we're not really, Pope Francis about, you want to have the smell of the sheep on your hands. You want to be with the community. And I feel like often the way the church is structured, queer clergy, we get a pass. And I don't feel good about that. I don't feel like, and I think many queer clergy don't, that we try in different ways to sort of to help those situations or to steer them in different paths. But I don't know, personally, it feels like, it just feels really safe and not right. So those are some of the things kind of swirling in me.
And you say you received some good feedback, I imagine, from your brother priests as well as from the community.
Yeah, I'd say, I think both. Yes, both other Jesuits, for whom this wouldn't have been a surprise. That right. I wrote about it might have been, but again, obviously I did that with permission. I didn't just
Oh, sure, yeah.
But yeah, I felt like I've gotten a lot of letters from other priests or people who are thinking about entering the priesthood who are gay and just their own questions. I've been very humbled because I don't think of myself as really like any smarter than anybody else. So to have people kind of want to share what their own experience has been or their own questions has been, really humbling.
That's wonderful. And is it, it's probably early to tell. And do you think that it'll encourage other gay priests to come forward and tell their stories, or have they since this was published? I
don't know that they have. There are certainly other gay priests who talk about their experience. There's a guy in Milwaukee who's spoken really openly and eloquently a number of times. Brian Massengale at Fordham is someone who is again, like, I think he's just so incredibly eloquent and insightful about the experience of being queer and a priest and Catholic. But I hope so, because I actually think the way the system is set up, if we don't come out kind of en masse, then the system's not going to change. It's
right.
And certain stereotypes of what a gay priest is or what homosexuality is, they're just going to continue to be out there. Like, it actually takes real representation to challenge those ideas. It's the people you know and meet that are queer, that help you understand what queer actually means versus what you think or you've been told that it means. It's the same, just like the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, in the 70s. It wasn't until a whole bunch of psychologists began to both talk about being queer and also began to work to change the APA's definition of homosexuality, that once they did that, things changed very fast. And I feel like the church is ripe for something similar to happen, because there are many queer religious priests, brothers, sisters, and they're doing amazing things. And so, I hope, but everybody's got to decide that for themselves. There are real risks involved. In the society, sure. I'm relatively privileged. I think the society is more accepting and more open to the conversation than other places. There are certainly priests in dioceses where if they came out, they could get fired or they could be punished in some other way. And that's part of the problem, actually, is that that's how the system is set up. There's some real dark structures in place that need to be exposed so that they can be changed.
Absolutely. Reading some of your articles recently, you wrote one on John Mulaney that kind of dovetails into this conversation kind of an interesting way. I'm going to quote you here on the article. You said, "Our relationships with public figures are built out of the interaction between the personas they put forward and our own imaginations, which develop those personas in ways that we may not even be aware that we're doing." So you compared to how two people might view a clip of Pope Francis and have completely different reactions to him. Do you think that is some of the disconnect we see, or that's the result of some of the disconnect we see from people falling away from the church, not understanding our mission today, or not being connected to, or misinterpreting personas, or the personality, if you will, of the church.
Sure. I definitely think that part of what we're seeing in people falling away, or some of their criticism, is about kind of what are they bringing to that moment? What kind of, how do they interact with the persona that's presented before them, whether it's of the Pope or a bishop or somebody in their parish. Yeah, I definitely think that's a part of it. I also think it's worth anybody who's in a position of authority or leadership to be considering, what is the persona that I am presenting? Because people are going to run with that in ways that you might not expect.
Yeah.
And so if you're, like, let's say a bishop is known for, or a priest for that matter, for being kind of a disciplinarian, there might be really good reasons why, but if that's the main persona people meet, then that's what they're going to run with. And that may not represent who that priest or leader actually is, but they've kind of created the circumstances that then create those problems as well. If that makes sense.
And you compared it to John Mulaney, and some of the recent challenges he's had publicly, going into rehab, divorcing his wife of 7 years, having a relationship now with Olivia Munn. People had a certain image of him, and he worked his wife, as you said in the article, into his comic routine, so it became a part of the John Mulaney persona that we expected, that we anticipated, that we laughed with. And my kids and I watched that show, that his specials on Netflix numerous times. So we love John Mulaney. But it is interesting.
Me too.
You can really translate a lot of that into what we experience today in the church.
Yeah, no, it's and that those ideas about Mulaney and the kind of the way we interpret him, those aren't original to me. That's something that's actually the conversation that's gone on around him is first it's he's betraying the image he's given us. And then it's people writing about that saying, why would we think that? And why do we get to think we have an opinion about what this man does in his private life? Right. I think those things are similar. Those are similar dynamics in the church. They're just human dynamics that we interpret based on what we're given. And then we might run with it in ways, or if a person tries to change, it might be hard for us to accept that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then you translate that into some of the abuse scandal, which has rocked the church for the last 20 something years now, and it's been on again, off again, but just people fall away, and that is, I guess that's going against, we as a church, we trying to live up to a mission, and then that image is changed and people fall away. So I think it's just an interesting way of looking at the different relationships people have with an organization, with a mission, and then this poor man who's obviously going through a crisis and addiction and loss of a family. It's
interesting. It's interesting to bring up the abuse crisis, because in a way, I think what happened at the beginning of the abuse crisis is that it is similar to Mulaney, in that people were suddenly rocked by the church is not what they've presented itself to be, or our leaders and things like that. And that's been a continuing part of the problem, is that even after the first wave of revelations, then there are further waves, and then there's the waves of how much cover up there continues to be. And so, but actually it's interesting. I think we've reached a point where the problem is that the church leaders won't accept and sort of acknowledge the degree to which the church is broken in this way, in this sense of cover up and secrecy and abuse. And as a result, so now our image is, this is kind of an organization that has serious problems and brokenness in it. And what I feel like our leaders should be doing, at least in part, is saying, yeah, that's right. That's right. This is a broken organization. We are broken people, and we have to learn and grow from this. And instead, I feel like oftentimes we just want to move on, and we want to go back to but actually, here's our position of strength. Here are the things we're good at. And that's fine. We have so many good things that we do in the church, whether it's, social work and work for people who are in need, or the ways we communicate the gospel. But if you're at this point, it often to me feels like we're ignoring the elephant in the room and everybody else sees it. It's really like you can't ignore it anymore, but we continue to insist on that at times.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And you also mentioned in the article how this whole sense of a parasocial persona or whatever affects you personally as a priest. The person they see on the altar, the persona that you're expected to project, and then there's the real Jim McDermott, or the Jim McDermott that who you are.
Yeah, no, I find
uncomfortable.
It does, and like that's part of the job, right? That's not
right.
You can complain, but it's like that's just how it is. But I find that I didn't really expect that to be as big a deal as it is, and it probably is another part of why I wanted to come out, because there were times where I would. Like during the pandemic, I said mass on Facebook, and say in June, which is Pride Month, I at least once at one of those masses, maybe more than one, I talked about queer Catholics and pride and things like that. I wasn't talking about my own experience,
right.
But I was talking. And then after those masses, people would say to me, "It's so good of you to bring that stuff up, right? To talk about those people." And I thought, I'm getting credit for something that is I shouldn't. I'm not doing that because I'm a nice guy. I'm doing that because I'm queer too. Like mm-hmm. I'm speaking from a personal place, and I don't want you to think like I want you to know that. I want you to know it's not exactly my agenda, because I feel that way. I want to feel that way about anybody, that they deserve to be respected and cared for and seen in the whole of who they are. But I don't want you to think like I'm taking some risk in a way, when actually the risk is I should be telling you, oh, by the way, I'm one of them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does.
Mm.
And it takes a lot of courage, and it takes time, but more and more people have to have those conversations in order for an organization to change. And we're just now, I think, coming to a point in our society where it's okay to begin to have those conversations, or at least on some level, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird. I think the church is so far behind on this, and it's much farther behind in other places than the United States. But
sure.
I mean, when you think that, like I said, the APA, they had these conversations over 40 years ago, and
right.
Our church is still at a place where sort of the equivalent members, the priests rather than the psychologists, mm-hmm. are still sort of dancing around and don't feel safe. It's sad to me, and
mm-hmm.
yeah, I hope things can change.
Well, you're giving people a lot of hope, at least by beginning that conversation in the way that you do. In the variety of different ways that your Facebook, your Twitter, it's a joy to see how you are translating some of the social pieces that we see in just everyday media, and translating that into the faith that we have as Catholics.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you think so.
Yeah. So, one of the things that one of the initial articles that I had read recently from you was Catholics deserve better homilies, and this struck me as a candidate for the diaconate, because we've completed a couple of different courses on homiletics, and actually had my professor on a couple weeks ago to talk about homily best practices. But you offered 5 tips for some of your fellow preachers that I thought were kind of fun. And I think as we look at trying to bring people back to church, wouldn't you agree that we kind of have to look at everything that we're doing in a way that the way that you're big on, you're a communicator, and we have to look at all the ways in which we communicate the word of God, and then how we're communicating that.
For sure. I absolutely think that the coming back from the pandemic is a great opportunity. Hopefully there will never be a reset, sort of a global or national reset moment like we're in right now. And so I think we've all missed things during the pandemic in terms of our religious communities and experience, but we've also probably learned things about what works for us, about new possibilities, either that we've tried or we've seen other people try. Like one thing for me, and I don't quite know how we do this in the church, but I feel like it's important. When you do mass on Facebook, like people can make comments the whole mass through, right?
Right.
They can offer petitions of their own, the whole community, and it doesn't stop the mass in its tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a powerful experience. Like people who were part of that community would say, oh, it was so nice that I did that. But I felt like what made that work is that everyone was really a part of it. They really they shared what was going on in their lives. So you felt like you were a part of a community. And I look at that experience and say, there has to be some way of giving people that at a mass, at a Sunday mass, daily mass, you see some of that happening. But to me, it was very striking that as much as we talk about the full participation of the community, that's what Vatican II asks for,
right,
or invites us to. I don't think we've gotten anywhere near that yet. Like most of the mass really is the most participation that people get to offer is they get to sing, which is great. If your community has singing, it's like but there's more that we can do. There's more, I think there should be more opportunity for them to share, to bring what's actually going on in their lives into the prayer of the community, whether that's spoken or whether there's a part of the mass. I had this idea where everybody can go to the front and post something that they're praying for, or at the Religious Ed Congress, they do this thing where they have a screen and I guess it's through Twitter. Somehow people are posting their prayers sort of like you post on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. That's a long answer to, I really do think this is a great moment and opportunity. And if we just go back to what we're doing, even if you think it's going well, I think we're missing out. We're missing a chance to just think about what could be.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing, one of the things that a lot of dioceses are now coming back, they're lifting the restrictions or lifting the dispensation, I should say, and inviting parishioners to come back to mass. And it's been a big challenge for many dioceses. People, I was sitting on a comfortable couch for 17 months and I watched it on my computer screen or on YouTube. And now you're asking me to come back. From what I've seen, there's a big disconnect with people understanding the real presence of the Eucharist and their need to receive Jesus and to be physically present. Are you seeing that?
I mean, I guess yes. I mean, I think the fact that people aren't coming means that argument or that part of our faith is not currently compelling in the way that we would like it to be. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I think. But then it's incumbent upon the church to help people feel like that could be important for them again, or that's meaningful. Mm-hmm. I think just saying this is part of our faith. The Eucharist is the center of our faith. Yes, that's absolutely true. But that may not get people to come. Just saying that, even though we would think, well, it's obvious, so yeah, I think again, it's sort of incumbent on the church to think of ways or experiences that can allow people. But I think it's a little early for those kinds of arguments because the pandemic's not over. A lot of places in the country, it's still incredibly unsafe. And and so to me, I think we're in this middle period of sort of how do we encourage people and also acknowledge that there's still safety issues to grapple with, and we don't want people to come back if there's serious risk to their health.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And in the meantime, we have the opportunity to continue to experiment with Facebook and YouTube and other digital medias where people have the opportunity to engage and respond. I had not thought of that, the opportunity for people to put in the chat. I know, having watched, I was watching a lot of Father Mike Schmidt's on Sunday mornings on YouTube, and the comments on his just fly through the entire liturgy.
Yeah.
You almost have to shut them off because they can be very distracting. But I guess it is an opportunity that maybe people hadn't thought about further, where they could be further engaged in the liturgy. That's interesting.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
No, there's lots of opportunities. There are.
So going back to your article real quick, I was curious about the Jesuit. You said for Jesuits, put your 3 points away for your homilies. So was that how you were taught as Jesuits? You make your 3 points in your homily, and then
I think my preaching teacher was a guy named Father Tom Kane, who's a Paulist, and I think he would say to me, "No, that's what you came with. I didn't teach you that." I think he's right. I think that early in our training, that 3 points is something you hear about a lot. I'm not sure I got it from, I think my preaching teacher is probably one of the people who said, stop doing that, but you sort of learn after you've been presiding or preaching for a while, that's just too much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like people don't need all that. And in fact, have you ever been in a church where the sort of the sound is such that you have to be really slow about how you talk because the sound starts to get on top of itself?
Yep.
And then all you're hearing is like, oh, you're not hearing anything they're saying.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I think. If you preach, if you give too much in a homily, that's what you're doing. Your brain, the people's brains, like it just becomes like a mush of like gray. Like, what are they going to walk away with? I don't know. Maybe the first thing that you said, which I think I write about just briefly in that article.
Yeah.
The first thing you say is pretty important. That's terrain that you have their attention for at least a second. So, so to really privilege it, to really see that you want it to be something important. Yeah.
And you wrap it up, your fifth point, not to go into every point, but just to wrap up this piece of the article, but you say, be a human being. Are priests afraid to be a human being from the pulpit?
I don't think I said it quite that bluntly.
Maybe it's the way I just said it. But.
I think, and this is something I feel like I've learned slowly over time. I think there are many priests that are really good at this, and I think maybe diocesan priests even better.
Yeah.
That there's just, the more transparent you are and just sort of about who you are, and that doesn't mean you have to talk about who you are. It doesn't mean you have to tell stories about your aunt and uncle, but like the more you can sort of be okay in your skin, if that translates, that becomes a homily in and of itself for people. And it helps people to understand that they're okay too. There are homilies I've given where I thought the content of this homily is really challenging and people should be mad at me, and they're not. And then I'll think, did I screw that up? Did I fail? And and sometimes it's like, yeah. Or is that really the point? Should I be trying to get people pissed off? No, not necessarily. But part of the way I've understood that over time is that it's like they see you trying to be just yourself.
Yeah.
Just whoever that is. And whoever that is doesn't have to be, I don't mean like be like me, like talk about pop culture or try to be funny or something. Like if you're pious, if you are a genuinely sort of pious person, then when you are that person, it will help people, even if they're not, because that's who you are. That's who you, not who you think you should be, not who you're afraid you have to be, but who you are. I think that's hard fought. Like I wouldn't say I do that very well all the time, or that I knew that going in. It's just over the years. Again, actually, saying Mass on Facebook was weirdly helpful for me in the sense that I felt like I was doing it in my place. I was just at home. It was kind of like this, like talking to people. Yeah. And it was liturgy, and it helped me feel like, oh, I guess just who I am, my normal self is enough. I don't have to put on anything more than that.
And I think it ties into your newsletter and your blog and the things that you write about on a regular basis. Clearly, pop culture is something that has interested you for a very long time, and so it's a way for you. It's kind of a lens. Is it? Let me ask you this question: is it a lens by which you see your spirituality, or is your spirituality a lens by which you see the pop culture?
I mean, it's a both. What's David Tracy, right? That conversation, that ongoing conversation between things that are revelatory of both. I will say there are many times, I'll be watching a television show, especially, and something in it will kind of unveil or open up something in me about who I am, or my relationship with God, or a desire in my heart, in a way very similar to, like, I think prayer can work. So yeah, I find that pop culture can often be a spiritual experience, and and I'm grateful for that. I wouldn't have thought that as a kid, but as an adult, that's definitely.
It's very cool. And well, with technology and social media the way it is, you have a platform now that we didn't have when we were kids,
For
it's
sure.
amazing.
It is.
I saw that you were a screenwriter for the TV show Preacher. What was that like?
It was wild. It was crazy. Preacher's an insane show. It's based on a comic book. It's about a broken down minister who he gets this power to basically compel people to do what he says. Mm-hmm. And he thinks it's the Lord and that he's supposed to use it to save people. But of course it's not that. And so everything goes horribly wrong. It was a great experience. It was because it was a show that both had a real sort of spiritual question at its core and drive. It was a lot about mercy and redemption, but it was so insane and sort of comic booky and irreverent. Like his best friend is a vampire, and then his girlfriend is maybe she's a contract killer. I think in the TV show she's more just a criminal. And it was a really, I loved kind of throwing all these elements together and yet finding in them something like at times profoundly spiritual.
Very cool. Well, Father, this has been a lot of fun having you on our podcast. Before we let you go, can you tell folks where to find you?
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. So I write for America Magazine. So if you go to America Magazine, usually I'm working on something. And then I'm on Twitter at Pop Culture Priest, and it's at Pop Culture, but with no E, Pop Culture, CULTUR Priest. And then I write a newsletter once a week that's called Pop Culture Spirit Wow, which is about pop culture and spirituality. And I write about screenwriting at a thing called Craft Service. It's on Blogspot. So I'm a little bit kind of all over the place.
That's awesome, though. That's fun. It sounds like you're having fun with it, though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I enjoy it a lot.
Awesome. Well, Father Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. And for all of our listeners, this will be out next week on our YouTube and on our Apple Podcasts and wherever you download your favorite podcast. So thank you again, Father. This was fun.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
I want to thank Father Jim for being on our show this week. It was fun talking about movies and TV on our show today. It was a nice change of pace. I'll leave links to Father Jim and his work in our show notes today. And for the full video presentation of this episode, please visit us at advancingourchurch.com. Well, that's our show this week. Many thanks to the Changing Our World podcast team and to Podastery Studios for their support of our show. Once again, if you'd like to check out our daily prayer video on christianscrosses.com, I'll leave a link in our show notes. And if you'd like more information about this show, please visit us at advancingourchurch.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Advancing Our Church is a production of Changing Our World, and we are a fundraising and social impact consulting firm that has been advising both nonprofits and corporations for more than 2 decades. For more information, please visit us at changingourworld.com. Well, that's it for me, everybody. I hope you have a terrific week. Take care, and God bless.